Hey there, folks. Welcome to the channel. Have you ever looked at Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea, and thought, man, that guy does not seem scared of the United States at all? Over the next few minutes, we're going to dive deep into the mind of Kim Jong Un and try to understand the method behind the seeming madness. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's get right into it. To truly understand why Kim Jong Un seems so fearless, we need to take a trip back in time. This resilience, this ability to weather the storm, is a huge part of what makes Kim Jong Un so seemingly fearless today. He's standing on the shoulders of giants, inheriting a legacy of defiance and self-reliance. All right, let's talk nukes. Those missile tests, those aren't just for show. They're a key part of North Korea's strategy for standing up to the United States. This nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of Kim Jong Un's confidence. But here's the thing about nuclear weapons. They're a bit like a double-edged sword. Kim Jong Un has to play a delicate balancing act. It's a high-stakes game of diplomacy, and so far Kim Jong Un seems to be playing it pretty well. Now, all this talk of nukes and diplomacy might make you think that Kim Jong Un's only focus is on the outside world. But that's not entirely true. North Korea is a tightly controlled state. So, we've talked about the nukes, the alliances, and the iron grip on power. But there's another piece of the puzzle that helps explain Kim Jong Un's confidence: his willingness to take risks. This guy is a gambler, a high-stakes player who's not afraid to push the envelope to get what he wants. Now, when we talk about Kim Jong Un's confidence, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, the level of control he exerts over North Korean society. This isn't just about having a strong military, it's about controlling information, shaping narratives, and ensuring that the people are with him. This control over information is crucial for Kim Jong Un. But control through information is only one part of the equation. Kim Jong Un also relies heavily on a vast network of security forces and informants to maintain order. Loyalty to the regime, specifically to Kim Jong Un, is paramount. Now, while the control measures are extensive, it doesn't mean they're foolproof or that there aren't cracks in the facade. Despite the risks, information from the outside world does trickle in. The question is, how long can this balancing act last? Here's the thing about power. It's often as much about perception as it is about reality. And Kim Jong Un understands this perfectly. He knows that the world is watching, analyzing his every move, trying to decipher his intentions. And he plays to this audience, carefully crafting an image of himself as a leader who is in control, who is not afraid to challenge the status quo, even if it means going toe-to-toe with the United States. This carefully constructed image of strength and defiance is a powerful tool. It projects confidence even in the face of adversity. It sends a message to both his adversaries and his own people that he is not to be underestimated, that he will not back down from a fight. This image is further amplified by the state-controlled media, which portrays him as a strategic mastermind, a benevolent leader, and the protector of the Korean people. This narrative of strength and defiance serves multiple purposes. It rallies the people behind him, creates a sense of unity in the face of external threats, and makes it more difficult for outside forces to gauge the true level of support he enjoys. By controlling the narrative, by shaping the perception of his rule, Kim Jong Un creates a powerful illusion of stability and strength, an illusion that contributes to his confidence on the world stage. He understands that in the game of international politics, perception is often reality, and he plays that game masterfully. Let's talk about North Korea's not-so-secret weapon, its relationship with China. It's a strategic alliance crucial to North Korea's survival for decades.
Remember those sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies? China's been a safety net. They share a border, history, and a lot of trade.
China provides essential goods like food and fuel. This economic lifeline gives North Korea room to defy the US. It's like having a rich friend who spots you cash.
China has its own reasons for this. They don't want a failed state on their border. Imagine the chaos and refugees, not ideal for China.
North Korea acts as a buffer zone. It's a strategic chess piece for China. For Kim Jong Un, this relationship is golden. It gives him leverage and security. He can push the envelope with the US, knowing China's got his back. But here's the thing about relying on big, powerful friends. You gotta be careful not to push your luck. China might be North Korea's main backer, but even they have their limits. They're not exactly thrilled about Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions.
So, Kim Jong-un has to play a delicate balancing act. He needs to keep China on his side while still projecting strength. It's a tough game, but one he's managed to play pretty effectively so far.
But then he'll turn around and test another missile. It's a high-stakes game of diplomacy. And let's not forget about Russia. They're still a major player in the region.
Russia has a vested interest in keeping the United States in check. Kim Jong-un can play China off Russia, leveraging their rivalry.
Now, while military alliances and nuclear weapons grab the headlines, Kim Jong-un's confidence also stems from a more subtle strategy: economic adaptation and diplomatic maneuvering.
Remember how we talked about those crippling sanctions? Well, Kim's found ways to soften the blow. He's encouraged a degree of private enterprise, allowing small businesses and markets to flourish. It's not exactly capitalism, but it's a far cry from the rigid state control of the past.
These markets provide essential goods and services, easing the pressure on ordinary citizens and making the economy a bit more resilient to those sanctions.
On the diplomatic front, Kim Jong-un's no fool. He knows how to work a room, how to exploit divisions within the international community. He'll dangle the promise of denuclearization, drawing out negotiations, buying time, and extracting concessions.
He'll play the victim card, portraying North Korea as a small nation bullied by a superpower, garnering sympathy from some corners of the world. These tactics might not always yield concrete results, but they keep North Korea in the conversation, a player on the world stage rather than a pariah state. And that in itself reinforces Kim Jong-un's belief that he can navigate the treacherous waters of international politics and come out on top.
The fragility of alliances. But let's be real, folks. This whole house of cards relies on a delicate balance of power, one that could shift at any moment. China's patience isn't infinite. They've made it clear that they're not going to support a North Korea that's constantly on the verge of war. If Kim Jong-un pushes too far, if he miscalculates, he risks alienating his most important ally. And then there's the wild card of international pressure. Sanctions might not be bringing North Korea to its knees, but they do take a toll. The constant threat of economic isolation and military action creates a level of uncertainty that even the most confident dictator can't ignore. So yeah, Kim Jong-un might seem fearless, and in many ways, he is. He's inherited a legacy of defiance, built a powerful military, and cultivated an image of strength that resonates both at home and abroad. But beneath that facade of confidence lies a precarious reality. He's walking a tightrope, relying on alliances that could crumble, playing a dangerous game of brinksmanship that could easily spiral out of control. Only time will tell if his gamble will pay off, or if the house of cards will come crashing down.
echoes of the past, the Korean War, and its legacy. To understand why Kim Jong Un seems so unafraid of the US, we've got to dig deep into North Korea's history, specifically the Korean War. Imagine this, it's 1950 and your country, just starting to find its feet, gets ripped apart by a brutal war. The US, with all its military might, intervenes, backing South Korea. Cities are flattened, millions die, and the country gets permanently divided. Now, fast forward to today, that war, it never officially ended. Sure, there's an armistice, but no peace treaty. So for North Korea, the war's memory, the devastation, the feeling of being invaded by a superpower, it's still raw, still shaping their worldview. This experience, it's ingrained in their national identity. They see the US not just as a rival, but as an existential threat, a force that once tried to wipe them off the map. This narrative, it's taught in schools, reinforced through constant propaganda. It's like a shared trauma, a rallying cry that unites the nation against a common enemy. So when Kim Jong Un acts tough, talks about nukes, it's not just bluster, it's rooted in this historical context, in the fear that history might repeat itself. He's tapping into a deep well of resentment, a desire to never be vulnerable again. The price of freedom, a nation forged in resistance. Now, the Korean War, it wasn't just about fighting off the US, it was about fighting for their own vision of the future, a future free from foreign influence. Remember, Korea back then, it was under Japanese rule, so the war, it became a fight for independence, for self-determination. And this idea, this us against the world mentality, it really took hold. North Korea, cut off from much of the world, isolated by sanctions, they had to rely on themselves. They built their own industries, their own infrastructure, all while constantly preparing for another possible invasion. This spirit of self-reliance, it's been romanticized by the regime, turned into a point of pride. It's the idea that they don't need anyone, that they can stand on their own 2 feet no matter the challenges. And this narrative, it feeds into Kim Jong-un's confidence. He can point to his country's history, its ability to survive against all odds as proof that they can handle anything the US throws at them. It's a powerful message, one that resonates deeply with a population that's been taught from generation to generation that their very existence is a testament to their resilience. Section 3, the US through North Korean eyes, a history of distrust.
Let's be real for a second. The US, it hasn't exactly been a beacon of peace and stability in North Korea's eyes. Think about it from their perspective. The Korean War, the bombing campaigns, the decades of sanctions, the constant military drills near their border. It all adds up to a pretty convincing narrative that the US is still out to get them, that they can't let their guard down for a second.
This deep-seated mistrust, it colors every interaction, every negotiation. It's like trying to make a deal with someone who's convinced you're going to stab them in the back the first chance you get.
And it's not just about the past. The US still has troops stationed in South Korea, still engages in shows of force that North Korea sees as provocations. So for Kim Jong Un, any talk of diplomacy, any attempt at rapprochement, it's always viewed through this lens of suspicion. He's constantly looking for the angle, the hidden agenda, the confirmation that the US can't be trusted.
This distrust, it's so deeply ingrained that it's hard to imagine any scenario where North Korea would willingly give up its nuclear weapons, its ultimate bargaining chip, its perceived guarantee of survival. Section 4, living with the ghost of war, the never-ending conflict.
And here's the thing about the Korean War, it never really ended. Sure, there's a ceasefire, but no peace treaty. Technically, they're still at war. This reality, it hangs over the peninsula like a thick fog, shaping every aspect of life in North Korea. It justifies the militarization of society, the constant propaganda, the sacrifices demanded of the people. It creates a siege mentality, a belief that they're constantly under threat, that they need to be prepared to fight at a moment's notice.
For Kim Jong Un, this frozen conflict, it's both a blessing and a curse. It allows him to maintain control, to rally the people around the flag, to justify his iron grip on power. But it also limits his options, making it incredibly difficult to break free from the cycle of confrontation and mistrust.
So when we see Kim Jong Un defying the US, testing missiles, refusing to back down, It's important to remember this historical context. He's not just some crazy dictator acting out, he's a product of his environment, a leader shaped by the long shadow of war, a war that in many ways is still being fought today, if only in the hearts and minds of the Korean people.
Section 1. The Art of Self-Reliance, Juche in Action.
All right, folks, let's talk about North Korea's surprisingly resilient economy. Despite sanctions and isolation, they've been surviving, even thriving. How?
It's called Juche, a philosophy of self-reliance, independence, and national pride.
Imagine being told you can't do something.
You'd get pretty determined to prove them wrong, right? That's North Korea. Hit with sanctions, isolated, but doubling down on Juche.
They're not an economic powerhouse, but they've kept the lights on, factories running, and missiles flying.
Okay, so we've talked about Juche, this idea of self-reliance. But here's where things get interesting. North Korea's economy isn't just about state-run factories and collective farms anymore.
Over the past couple of decades, something kind of surprising has happened. Markets have sprung up. Yep, you heard that right, markets. Places where ordinary North Koreans can buy and sell goods, often operating outside the traditional state-controlled system.
It's a bit of a paradox. A country known for its rigid control, also embracing elements of free enterprise. Now, these markets aren't exactly like the bustling bazaars you'd find in other parts of Asia. They're carefully regulated, and the government still keeps a close eye on things.
But they've become an essential part of life for many North Koreans, a way to supplement their incomes, access basic goods, and even find a bit of entrepreneurial freedom.
This rise of markets has actually made North Korea's economy more resilient. It's created a kind of buffer against sanctions, a way for people to get by even when the official economy is struggling.
And it's given Kim Jong Un a bit of breathing room. He can point to these markets as proof that his system isn't completely inflexible, that he's willing to adapt to changing circumstances.
Of course, it's all about control. Kim Jong Un knows that a completely free market could undermine his power. So, he allows these markets to exist, but he keeps them on a tight leash, ready to rein them in if they ever threaten his grip on power. Section 3. Betting on Bitcoin crypto and the quest for economic autonomy.
Now here's where things get really wild. North Korea has reportedly been dabbling in the world of cryptocurrency.
Yep, you heard that right. Bitcoin, Ethereum, the whole shebang. It might seem crazy, this isolated nation diving headfirst into the digital economy, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Think about it. Sanctions are all about cutting off access to the global financial system. But cryptocurrencies, they operate outside that system. They're decentralized, borderless, and practically untraceable, which makes them incredibly appealing to a regime that's constantly trying to evade sanctions.
There's evidence that North Korea has been involved in some pretty sophisticated cyber attacks, targeting cryptocurrency exchanges and stealing millions, if not billions of dollars worth of digital assets. They've even been accused of using these stolen funds to finance their weapons programs.
Now, it's hard to say exactly how much North Korea is making from all this crypto activity. They're pretty good at covering their tracks, but it's clearly a strategy they're taking seriously, a way to generate revenue, evade sanctions, and thumb their nose at the international community all at the same time.
So far, we've talked about how Kim Jong Un uses nukes, internal control, and alliances to project confidence. But there's one more piece to this puzzle: diplomacy.
Yeah, you heard that right, diplomacy. He knows how to work a room, how to play the diplomatic game. Remember those summits with Donald Trump? He went from being the world's biggest pariah to shaking hands with the leader of the free world.
Now, those summits didn't lead to major breakthroughs, but for Kim Jong Un, it was about changing the narrative, showing he's a serious player.
And it worked. Suddenly, everyone was talking about North Korea and the possibility of peace.
Section 2, the Kim Dynasty, a legacy of defiance.
So there you have it, folks. We've explored the 6 pillars of Kim Jong Un's confidence. It's a complex mix of factors, creating a leader who stands up to the most powerful nation on Earth.
But Kim Jong Un's confidence isn't just about him, it's about a system, an ideology cultivated over generations. He's the 3rd generation of the Kim dynasty. ruling North Korea for over 70 years. That's a lot of history, a lot of ingrained beliefs about North Korea's place in the world.
Kim Jong Un is the product of a system that views the U.S. as the enemy and believes strength is the only way to survive. The Kim family is seen as destined to lead North Korea to greatness. This upbringing shapes his worldview, his sense of self, and his understanding of power. Kim Jong Un embodies this system, making him dangerous and unpredictable. So, what does the future hold for Kim Jong Un and his fearless facade? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The truth is, nobody knows for sure, but one thing's for certain. Kim Jong Un's confidence isn't going away anytime soon. He's shown a willingness to take risks and push boundaries. The challenge for the United States and its allies is to figure out how to deal with this enigma. One thing's for sure, the world will be watching as Kim Jong Un continues to write the next chapter in North Korea's story.